Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Mariah Dawn. Mariah is an author, EMT, and mom living in sunny San Diego, where yay is her favorite word and a reflection of her positive outlook on her life. Her memoir, The Dragon in You, captures the first 32 years of her journey through love, loss, and the rediscovery of faith. Welcome to the show, Mariah.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be here.
Yes, when I read that line about yay as your favorite word, I'm like, I could have written that in my own bio.
It's just encapsulates everything.
I feel like I respond to that so many times, like email responses or text responses. I'm always like, yay.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I also have had one other guest come on and she called herself an exclamation point enthusiast. And I was like, I also think I need to adopt that because I put so many exclamation points in my messaging. So,
Totally. Well, as you know, writers and readers, just words are they're just so important to me. And I feel like when you find one that connects with, or, it just is great.
yeah.
So
Well, and I want
adopt it.
people to feel like the genuine excitement that I have in our
hmm
conversation or whatever it is. I'm genuinely excited for you. So I just want you to feel that through my message.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, well, I feel like you're so much more than our bios here. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Mariah, and I grew up in San Diego. I have two beautiful children, Ronan and Rayla. And my quick elevator pitch, I grew up Mormon, ended up leaving that religion. I did meet my husband, and we got married in the temple, all of that. And then slowly throughout the years, progressing from kind of a naive life, to entering, becoming an EMT and all of that, decided the religion wasn't for me, along with some and I think we forgot to do a trigger warning in the beginning of the episode, but there are some domestic violence situations that happened, and kind of through that, left my religion, left spirituality in general. And then he ended up passing away, and I had a new identity of a widow. And then through that, just transforming my life into writing a book and taking it back, and then turning 32 years old. So,
I think in reading A Dragon in You that, and I don't know if you have had this as well, but I feel like I got this sense from you as well, as I was not prepared when I was younger to think about all these identity changes we would have in as adult, right? I thought we would just choose one and that's what we would be, and then we would just be that. And then it's almost like you have this like crisis of like, wait, I'm not that identity anymore. So who do I say that I am? And I just wasn't prepared for that in adulthood, I don't think. I don't know about you.
totally. And that actually is, I kind of go brick by brick through that in my book, because I was a Mormon, right? Like I put all of my stock into that. And then I knew I needed to become a wife and a mother. And then when, I think what you're trying to say is, or at least for me, when you become a mom, it's like the identity that you think it is narrow, and then all of the sudden it opens up to like all of these different things. And single mom living in the suburbs, mom homeschooling, like all of these different things. And underprepared is the greatest word to describe it. Because there's so many avenues, there's so many beautiful places it can take you. There's turns that you weren't expecting, having to regroup, and yeah, and then holding on to the like who your identity is, who Mariah is at the end of the day. So
Yeah. I think we can get lost in
mhm.
what life is throwing at us, right? And we're just responding to life, but we get lost because we're just trying to. And I think a huge part of that is when we become moms, right? Is because we want
Mhm.
to do the the best by our kids. So we just put ourselves further and further on the back burner to do that, to show up for our children. And, but then like you realize at a certain point, like finding yourself again, right? Like
Right,
who, like you said, who is Mariah or who is Kara before I was
right.
that?
Daily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We constantly have to recalibrate that. Well, I know you disclosed a bit about, domestic violence that we'll potentially cover in here, and then the death of your husband as well. So, talk to us about The Dragon in You and kind of bring the listeners in on that story if they haven't picked it up yet.
Sure. The Dragon and You, again, is a memoir of the first 32 years of my life. And so I talk in the beginning, childhood, high school, kind of the formative years of who I surrounded myself with. And then um, I came up with the title Dragon in You because it's kind of like the which wolf will you feed? So, the old saying, whatever wolf you feed will be the stronger one. And so to me, I feel like we all have this dragon inside of us. And it's this dichotomy of, are we going to show that dragon a way to bring forth like strength and authenticity and integrity? Or are we going to live in kind of a fear mentality and bite and scratch and claw our way into what we want? And to tie it in, I feel, or like the best example I can give is I wanted a family and my husband wanted a legacy, right? So in the end, we both achieved that. I have my family, and these are actual conversations we had,
Wow.
and he wanted a legacy, right? And we achieved that. But the thing is that we did it all through this lens of fear, for me, codependency, for him. I'm not going to speak to him, but the things that he said were, afraid of being alone, abandonment. And we could have achieved the end goal a different way, in a way that would have brought forth something that wasn't such a tragic book.
Yeah.
So in the end, I just want to try to show people our values or what we want is usually good. It's just how we go about achieving that.
Yeah. And I meant to say this before when we talked about like the underperforming conversation, or being underprepared.
Hmm.
And how can you possibly prepare for what life is going to throw at you? I just don't think you can, right? Like maybe you can have some tools in your toolkit.
Hmm.
And I think that's so true of others, right? And like we're all just showing up trying to do what it, like you said, values, goals, whatever that may be, but we might be going about it differently.
Hmm. Right. And um, I think at the end of the day, and the way that I've learned to have grace for others and mostly have grace for myself is knowing it may have turned out this way, and I go back to the family and the legacy, like it may have ended in the way that like we are standing here today, but I can look back and think about all of the I was trying to do it in a loving way, right? Like I had so much love in my heart that I was trying to make this thing happen. And um, I can give myself grace and say, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I don't think that he was trying to hurt anybody either, but we end up hurting people. We end up having miscommunications and just relying on, whatever we're going to do that day. If we're just grounded in trying to do the best, then we can have compassion for other people's and for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, when did you start writing this book? Like, where in your journey were you? Having read this now, I kind of know somewhat of the story, but where were you when you started writing this?
Yeah, so in 2020, I had been with my husband we were married 6 years and then, together 10 years. But at this point, I had to leave for my own safety. And he's a military man. He served 14 years. And at the time, we were living in Pennsylvania. And there was a couple instances and I told him, this is not who you are. You really need to get some help. I need to we need to remove ourselves from each other so you can do that. And I started getting really bad panic attacks to the point where I was non-functional. So the best I could do was show up and, take my kids to a park and give them their little fruits and snacks and whatever. But when I started writing down what would happen, so if something were to I get a flashback and I'd write it all down, and then I could feel myself like releasing it.
Wow.
And in that, I did that for about a year. And then they slowly subsided, and then he passed away. And it felt like everything was 30 days, like from the beginning of
Wow.
my life to the moment he died felt like 30 days, right? And I'm sure a lot of us are still like, isn't it December 2019? Like,
Yeah.
like the pandemic seems just like minuscule, like so long and so short at the same time. So at that point, my sense of time was so messed up that I actually went in and put it in chronological order. And then I started filling in the gaps. And it's not spatial awareness, but like time awareness. I started to feel like, wow, I really was in that hospital room giving birth to my daughter. He really was deployed for a whole year. Like,
Yeah.
and through that, in of in May last year, I had a 167 word page document,
Wow.
and I just casually mentioned it to somebody, and they told me I had a book. So it never was meant to be a book until it was done, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Maybe
Because it
remove
was,
that pressure a little bit.
yeah, there
Yeah.
wasn't, well, and in no part of it was I writing for a reader. I was just writing it for myself. Maybe that's not true. When I ended up towards the end getting an editor to go through it, she was saying, well, that might be important to you, but it's not really important to the reader, or you're kind of going in more directions than you need to. And so at that point, there was some scaling back or adding two parts where, it's all in your head, but the reader didn't go through it. So,
Yeah. So there need to
yeah,
fill in the gaps a little bit there.
yeah. So, um, yeah, it's kind of a fun question to answer because it was never supposed to be what it was. And then
Wow.
in the span of from May to October, I was holding it in my hands.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. It sounds like it almost grounded you a bit, right? Like kind of put you back in your space. Like, oh yeah, I did go through that, or I did experience that.
Yeah, and that's always an interesting kind of thing to dive into where because there was a time in my life where the doctors had told me that I had like amnesia, where I could barely remember a couple of minutes before,
Wow.
um, and not like it was like kind of like zoning out, but I was so I couldn't process what was happening that I just kind of disassociated really hard. And so it's kind of, I don't know, it's just the whole grounding thing is so spot on because I no longer had to hold it in my body. I no longer had to be the witness to what happened. And being able to, and I had kind of joked for years, like when somebody said, like, oh, tell me about yourself, like I just wanted to hand them a book. It kind of been like a running joke.
Yeah.
To just be like, I don't want to have to remember every detail. If I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, oh yeah, it happened at this month or time, I'm like, I may get it wrong, but I love the fact that I don't have to be the only person who knows the exact moment, day, and time that something happened because it's no longer my burden.
Yeah.
So
That's great. So it sounds like it was also healing for you to write this as well.
completely healing, yes. It went from I would go to like the park, and this was prior to him passing, but I would just someone would say, "How are you?" And I was so so callous to just be like, "I'm going through an awful divorce." But the reason why I learned later, the reason why people do that is because I needed their facial reactions to tell me how bad my situation was.
Wow.
So by seeing them be like shocked or upset or to say, wow, that sounds awful, that allowed me to feel awful.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Um,
Like being that
and
was that part of like the disassociation you're talking about? Like you weren't even able to like kind of gauge where that was at.
right, right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, if they were able to kind of allow me to feel that because they were saying it was bad, almost like you can kind of imagine just like riding along a train and you've kind of seen all this stuff, but then like to actually know that you were the one in all of this. And actually, I'd always journaled. I have journals from third grade. So I had all these like notes app of all, and I would go back and read them and be thrown into it and be like, oh, like yeah, that really did happen because I remember writing this. So
Yeah. And I
yeah.
imagine too that's part of your mind or your body's way of protecting yourself is just kind of trying to not remember these events, right? Like that didn't actually happen. So I'm sure it's a protective mechanism or a response.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was so as I was reading, I was thinking a lot about this has to be so, and maybe this was part of it because you weren't thinking it was going to be in a book, but this has to be so hard to write because there are people in his circle, right? His family, they're still living and people are still around. And writing this in such a way that wouldn't, I mean, the word that's come to mind, like just like kind of infuriate others that maybe had a
Mhm.
different version of the story that they were witnessing.
That was the thing that I thought about the most before releasing the book. Um, because right, like he was a soldier, he was an officer, he had people who follow, who were
Yeah.
his mentor, his family, his siblings, all of these people who lived a completely different life. They had
With
a
him.
whole different, I don't want to say version because that kind of sounds cheap, but experience, I guess, with him. And um, what I did is I actually offered to his one of his siblings and his mom and his a couple other people. I probably should list them out
Yeah.
for privacy.
His close circle.
Yeah, and I told them I'm releasing this book. If you would like to advocate for your, insert identity here, brother, sister, well, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I will take into consideration, but in order for the most authentic version of this to happen, I need to take in, like, hey, could you change this word, or that story's not completely important, or to feed on them and let them know their insights, because again, I'm writing it from my perspective. Um, None of them decided to, I don't want to say edit, but proofread
Sure.
it, but I wanted to allow them the opportunity to do that. And then when I did receive feedback from a few people, they were extremely relieved because they didn't. The book can kind of sound like, oh, you're just going to go and you know a gossip type book or whatever, but it really is about the evolution of me, of Mariah,
Yeah.
through kind of the lens of my life, which includes my late husband. Um, but it's not really about him.
Yeah.
It's not his story. Don't talk about I don't publicly talk about my children and kind of how they're adapting to this, because I can know what they're telling me, but I don't know true in their hearts, and I don't know truly the heart of my husband. I know the 10 years we spent together. But I wanted to be as mindful as possible without pulling away from the purpose of the book, which was to say, like, when people are in situations where, why is he treating you like that? Or, the whole why don't you leave? To really understand what's going on in my mind, you had to learn what was going on in the whole house.
Yeah.
And I think there's extreme value and every relationship is going to be different, but getting a real raw look into it with my journal entries and my perspective at the time, a few months after, and then my fully formed therapy session um, after all of that. Um, I've yet to kind of read a book like this, and a lot of my pull to do this was, and I'll go into it in my book flight, but it's to make it obsolete, is to make this a history book, something, wow, I can't believe there was, that happened. It blows my mind that
Yeah.
um, life used to be like that for people. And I think that gives my late husband and me some meaning to what happened,
Yeah.
to let people dissect it or say, hey, I see my story starting in the first few chapters of this book. I don't want it to end like this. Like, how can we step in front, like make us a lesson, a history book, and at least, I guess, give us the opportunity to have some good come from it.
Yeah. I always think of that as like finding a purpose to your pain, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that really does help, at least for me. I can't speak to anybody else, but it's really helped me in my mind to be like, well, what is the purpose here? And thinking of it as like a spiritual, like, God, what are you trying to teach me right now? Or what is this? It just shifts that mindset to be like, okay, there's a purpose behind my pain. It still sucks, but
Right,
there's a purpose here.
right. And that's, I think, the best that we can do, right?
Yeah.
And there has been criticism because, he's not here to write his book. He's not here to tell his story. But you just kind of have to look at his wife and kids and know that we wish he was.
Yeah.
They're Everyone's devastated that he's not here to tell his story, but that's what we're dealing with. So
Yeah.
I can show my purpose and hopefully just kind of go from there.
And I think you have to, as part of your healing, like back to what we were talking about, like just his circle around him and how they would receive it is you can't diminish what happened to you either. Like if you discount your own story, then there's no healing or closure for you either, because then you're diminishing it in your own mind to make it fit whatever narrative someone else wants it to fit.
Right. And also, it wouldn't draw in the people that I'm trying to draw in.
Yeah.
So in doing this, I've made new friends. I've been able to talk to other people going through certain similar things. And that wouldn't happen by diminishing it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and this might be a maybe, I don't know if naive question is the right word, but if someone reads this book, they pick up The Dragon in You and they see themselves in the story, what advice would you give them? Because like you said, people say, "Oh, just leave him. Like he shouldn't be treating you like that." But that's really, you have to look at the whole story of what was happening, right? So is there any advice or like kind of, I don't know, I hate to say blanket advice, but what you would say to someone that maybe resonates with their story and is in a situation like that?
specifically for someone who sees themselves in my story, I would say that I mean, it's becoming a timeless phrase of boundaries, right? Like you're just not a person who I want to spend time with. Like there's nothing good coming out of it, and we can probably do better going separate ways or not being in a romantic relationship. Um, and addressing it not so much as, and I know that there's anger in all of it, right? Like angry for the girl of my past, right? Like I'm angry that there's still people who aren't focusing on communication or, using um, fear tactics to perpetuate certain behaviors. Um, but just removing the ego, right, which is the hardest thing in the world to do, but saying like, hey, it's it's not you, it's not me, it's just not for us, right?
Yeah.
Square peg, round hole kind of thing. And allowing it to be that. And not diving into all of the, you know, he said, she said, I can't believe label, like we were going into like identities or trying to diagnose anybody, just strong, firm boundaries. And in doing that and saying, I won't, this behavior isn't good for me to be around. You're kind of also letting them know socially that it's not a good idea to treat other people like that. And I get it. It's so hard when you have this like kind of like chemical love, right? Where the highs are high and the lows are lows,
Yeah.
and you're always chasing those highs. But um a lot of, from what I've read and the people I've been around, after we've gone through this, like the highs were so good and the lows were so bad, and we kept chasing that initial attraction, like we all live very simple lives. Like we treasure the suburban minivan 9 to 5, like
Yeah.
like there's nothing. And if we could sum it down, I guess, to a sentence, like there's nothing that comes before my peace. And if
Yeah.
you need to kind of guide your boundaries and know like this is removing me from feeling peaceful, then that's enough. Like there doesn't need to be a dissertation, there doesn't need to be a whole book. It can just be it's not peaceful for me.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I'm thinking about too is I imagine, and I feel like in reading your story, is it took a lot, right? Like building yourself up to choose yourself, right? Like my self-worth is more than this, right? Or my peace
Mhm.
is worth more than this. But the courage that it takes, and I imagine like the strength and the gumption you have to build up to be able to step away too.
Yeah, this is still something that I, kind of bounce around in my head, is that it came down to my life being threatened that I left. And I mean, you can look at the statistics. There's so many people who don't make it out alive.
Yeah.
And I got saved, I guess. I don't like um but I think about that moment where I shouldn't be here, and I was in that house thinking I'm either going to die here or maybe I'll get a few more months. And so what would a logical person do is they would choose the few more months, right? Um and so I haven't felt brave about it. Oops. I haven't felt like I don't know, like it
There
didn't
wasn't
feel
this
like a,
feeling that rushed in.
yeah, it wasn't
Okay.
like today's the day. But I do think that that came with time. And showing up every day for my children and for myself, um that feeling came. And I'm very open about that, because if you're in a position where you don't feel brave but you see yourself inching towards this, like you don't have to think less of yourself. Like for a long time I did feel
Yeah.
that way, because it, it just was like A plus B equals C. um but yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but
Okay. All
yeah.
right. So it's not like a moment or a feeling, or maybe it's like that was the final straw, right? Is to see your life threatened. And in
Yeah,
that way, it was like, nope, okay,
I think,
that's it.
yeah, and then I think for me, it just over time having faith in myself, knowing that I was still showing up for my children, that they were, even if it was the bare minimum, they were fed and they were taken outside and they were bathed. Um, but the faith and the bravery took years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that it did, right? It didn't happen overnight and it doesn't like the end part of it doesn't happen overnight either.
Yeah, and then so it wasn't like a soapbox moment, it wasn't a angel came down or
Yeah.
whatever and showed me my future, but it was just a lot of grace.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, what have you learned about yourself through writing this book?
Um, I've learned that I have a lot of feelings. I never really thought that I did. And then I learned that I spent a lot of, 32 years in a reactionary state. So I had all of this, all these day-to-day things and um never really had time to process them. And then when I started to do that through writing, I found that I really love myself. Like I have so much like self-love and that's a wonderful place to be. But it took acknowledging, I said earlier, codependence issues,
Yeah.
abandonment issues, um and knowing that they weren't like faults of mine, they were maybe um like I don't mean like addictive as in fun, but addictive patterns as in I was chasing the quick fix of, oh, you're not gonna tell me you're not gonna abandon me. Like I need
Yeah.
to know. Or the opposite, the guy he treated me terribly, but I never left. And so he felt the security in knowing I wasn't going to leave. So um just a lot more words to my feelings and uh, we mentioned earlier how much we love the word yay,
Yeah.
right? And I love when I find a word that fits what I'm feeling because then I feel like I can let somebody else know.
Yeah.
And that has brought a lot of community to, um, my life and that I can build the life that I want.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Well, if listeners pick up The Dragon in You, what is your wish for them as they read it? What do you hope they take away?
We've kind of already discussed the person who finds themselves in my story,
Yeah.
but I really want people who aren't experiencing domestic violence to read it and get inside of the head of somebody who has. And there won't always, every story is different. There's a million different ways that this comes about, but to just help them understand that it's way more complicated than even the person who is in this understands themselves, and to have compassion and maybe to pick up a few, buzzwords about it and open the conversation
Yeah.
to, um, you know, just not have it be so taboo, I guess. Like it's it's a starting point, I would say, for people. And then also, which is a little controversial, but here I am. I want people who maybe are treating people in a fear mentality of, um, being hurtful towards others to know that this is with me for the rest of my life. There's moments where there's one time I was typing on my laptop and a guy just started to walk towards me, um, to sit down, nothing.
Yeah.
And my entire body went back into fight or flight. And I mean, just for them to know, like, you can prevent that. Like get help, you know? And
Yeah.
that's what the person who loves you would want. Um, because these actions, I mean, even sometimes when I yell at my kids and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like there's still sometimes they look at me and I'm like, "That imprinted for a long time on you. I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Um, and just knowing like this is like I believe we have a spiritual side to us, but we also have this um human nature to keep ourselves safe, and we have to honor that and for us to be able to show up better for other people so we can be in a state of growing.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to be able to take a step back, right, and look at it. And I feel like I kind of heard that's what you were kind of saying about being able to write it, right? As you kind of took a step back and that like bird's eye view was allowed you to process, right? Like you're like, it gave me the words to what I was feeling.
Right.
And I think we have to do that continually, no
Hmm.
matter who we are in the story, right? We have to be able to look back and be like, okay, yeah, that's something that I didn't perform my best today. Or hear people do this, they'll do it on their way home from work or whatever. If you're a stay-at-home mom like me, maybe you have to do it at the end of the day, but taking the time to evaluate, because our actions do have consequences, and
Hmm.
seeing where we are and what we did in the story.
Right. And again, just removing that ego, right? I want to be the best mom.
Yeah.
I want to be the best at, or I want people to tell me they liked my book. I want people to tell me that I'm doing a good job, but not allowing that to dictate, like, getting in my kid's face and being like, you will behave perfectly because everyone needs to know that I'm a good mom. I can turn that around and be like, yeah, they're so comfortable and we're all learning together. And I they apologized for, excluding somebody, but like, wow, I'm so grateful for this moment where we can all get better together. Like
Yeah.
that's the same thing to me in my eyes as being the best mom ever. They don't need to sit, in the church pew exactly silent, staring forward for an hour for me to understand where my value is.
Yeah. Now, no, not one of us is an expert. So,
Right. And yeah, and we don't need to be. And when I was trying to live a life where nobody knew about my past, I didn't have the right friends. I wasn't in
yeah.
the right community. I wasn't surrounding myself with people who could help me. And acknowledging where I was able to grow from there. So it just doesn't serve us.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see where that's not being authentic to you, right? Like if I'm excluding this whole half of my life, like shadowing that, like that's not me.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll include links, listeners, to go grab your copy of The Dragon in You. And so make sure you check that out in the show notes. I'd love to switch gears, though, a little bit and talk about who you are as a reader and what type of genres you enjoy reading.
Yes, I love audiobooks. So I'm the audio book, self-help. I also love memoirs. I love diving into somebody else's life and understanding their process. I haven't read like it's kind of funny. I've written a book, but I don't have a whole long list of books that I've read. But I'm starting to feel the value behind it. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Well, how in your busyness do you find time to read? Being mom,
Um,
EMT.
audiobook.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's I'm and I talk about it a little bit in my book too. I learn different than other people. So for me, the listening auditory and moving my body. So my house is pretty clean because I'm always listening to something. And as I'm processing it, I'm moving and organizing and all of that. So,
Yeah, I credit audiobooks to my clean house as well.
yes. Yes.
Well, you have brought a book flight with you today. Can you tell us how you chose these books?
Yeah. Okay. So I will start with let's do with no visible bruises.
Okay.
What we don't know about domestic violence can kill us by Rachel Louise Snyder. I read that book like 2 months before my husband died,
Okay.
and he did take his life. So, and there was domestic violence. And this book, where I kind of talked about earlier, the last sent or one of the last sentences in the book is it said, make this book obsolete, right? Like make this a
Yeah.
history book. And I really adapted that to that because I wasn't living, and I write about this in my latest blog post. I was living a life I was running from, and I wanted a life I was running to.
Yeah.
And making that book obsolete would make me run towards my life, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pull people out of it, like we just are. Um, but that book goes into, she talks to people like police officers, victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. She goes into statistics and visits jail, talks to them about how they felt knowing what they've done, why they're in prison. And having that global perspective was just, I'm seeing it now. I try to do that in my book,
Yeah.
from my perspective, but understanding there's so many facets to it. So I love that book. That's the book that I've referred to people when they've said, I know this person and they're struggling. I'm like, read this book because there's statistics. Like it takes 3 active times of trying to leave before someone really does. And I mean, packing up and leaving, going back, packing
Yeah.
up, leaving. So to know that like it's kind of a science thing too, I think gives people more compassion because they're working through the way that the brain works. Um,
Yeah. Well, there was that scene in your book too where you were in the hospital room or the ER, I believe. Don't I might misquote myself here, but and you're like you were just praying that someone was going to walk by the window in your room and see what was happening in the room,
mhm.
right? So I think such an important book for, like you said, maybe first responders or ER people or anybody just to be aware so they can be, if they see something, it kind of does raise a flag for them of like, wait, you know, and I don't know that I mean, I'm a physical therapist by trade, and we were told, oh, ask these questions, but we're not trained in like outside of, like you said, visible bruises or like certain things. But
Mhm.
like if that's not there, your brain's not thinking that if you're not trained that way.
Right, which actually segues into my next book
Okay.
perfectly.
Okay.
Um,
Perfect.
it's The Gift of Fear, Survival Signs That Protect Us from Violence. And so when you mentioned like letting other people know, like, hey, if they're fight, fright, fawn, freeze
Yeah.
response, all of that, being able to look at someone and be like, hey, do you think maybe you're doing this to protect yourself? And just allowing that outside perspective. This book was written by a guy. He has like a security, like he did like high profile, right? So if
Okay.
a celebrity was being stalked, they would hire him to go through the emails, watch the videos.
Wow.
Yeah, and for me, I was so terrified of the world outside of me, and I saw it getting like smaller and smaller while realizing what I was doing, right? I was like, I don't want to go out. I don't trust the world around me. When people say mean things to me, like I didn't know how, like what was actual danger and what was me responding from past
Yeah.
triggers. And I mean, he goes into um the way that if someone's talking in third person, if they're talking in first
Oh,
person,
wow.
talking,
Okay.
yeah, and that gave me my power back because, and then it also made me look back and be like, wow, I was in really severe danger before. And kind of bringing some gravity to that because I was seeing how what he was saying and what it actually meant and the way that he was behaving. But then going out into the future, like in the future, right? Like, I'm an EMT. I work concerts a lot.
Okay.
There's a lot of drugs on board. There's um, alcoholics, or, there's people getting kicked out of venues who are
Yeah.
upset. And watching these signs, I've learned, like, if I'm in danger or if someone's kind of, uh, I don't want to say exaggerating, but,
Yeah.
like
Like an
feeling a big
awareness.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's allowed me to go out and be bigger in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like so fascinating. Like
Yeah,
just
I don't want
from,
to there's like a few like spoilers in there where like his story and all of that comes into play. And like I I actually was a little bit of a weirdo, and I like emailed them and was like, "Thank you for writing this book,"
yeah.
like, and understanding, like, where you come from and where you went and all of that. Like, and they even wrote back. They were
I was saying, I
like,
don't think that's weird at all. I think people want to
"Yeah."
know their book made impact, right? Like it mattered to someone.
Yeah, I mean, it significantly helped the well-being of myself and my children. And just, I can't recommend the book enough. So,
Okay. All right. So we had No Visible Bruises, and that was by Rachel Louise Snyder. And then that book was The Gift of Fear by Gavin D. Decker, right? Or am I?
Becker, yeah.
Becker, Gavin D. Becker. Can't read my own handwriting here. And then what's the last book you brought today?
It's called Building a Non-Anxious Life by John Deloney, Dr. John Deloney. And if you're not familiar with him, he has a podcast and he's written a few books, but he's he's the person who goes first, I'll say, kind of, and I've kind of adopted that, trying to go first and put where I am on the table. But
Yeah.
he writes this book about how he was a very anxious person, and learning that anxiety isn't the problem, right? He uses the analogy of fire alarms, right? He's like, the fire alarm's going off. Your anxiety is like a fire alarm. That's not the problem. The problem is the smoke, it's the fire. And so taking your anxiety and trying to figure out what the root of it is, what the fire and the smoke that's setting off the alarm, so you can go into that and heal it, or realize, like, hey, I'm not in a good situation,
Yeah.
or uh yeah, the bills are coming out and I don't have the money. Like, the problem isn't that you got the notice in the bill, it's the money, right? So it helps you find solutions to your anxiety, and not attack your body for it, and not feel shame and guilt, which he
Yeah.
explains that he felt a lot of it. I felt a lot of that. And then he goes into, finding your community and what that means, finding some kind of purpose bigger than you, and a few other things. So
Wow. That sounds like it could be so helpful to so
it's
many of us.
yes, I audiobooked it, and I think it was on the library too, but it um yeah, there's just, if I could go back and tell my younger self, again, it just goes back to that, like, loving yourself. Like, you may be anxious, but like, maybe that's a good thing. Like, maybe you're trying to problem solve, and
Yeah.
like, let's pat ourselves on the back for that. That's half the work. And then go out and do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Building a Non-Anxious Life by Dr. John Deloney. Thank you so much for bringing those books today. How I love to end our show is with our bonus pairings, and they're just a speed round of questions you can answer really quick. Are you a rereader?
No.
Okay. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Those books that I
Okay.
just mentioned, yeah.
Yep. Where is your favorite place to read?
Audiobooks cleaning my house.
Okay. Lastly, what are you reading next?
Healing Your Lost Inner Child book.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I hope you enjoy that one. And thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Yeah, thank you so much for holding space for this book and conversation.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Mariah Dawn. Her book flight includes books for anyone who might be experiencing domestic violence or anyone in your life. Head on over to bookishflights.com to see the full list of books that we talked about today. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.